Okay, so today we will start a new system of our body, the digestive system. In today's lecture, we will first see the parts of the digestive system or the organs of this system. Then we will talk about different processes take place in the digestive system. Then we will talk about the peritoneum. Peritoneum is the connective tissue covering of the abdominal cavity. So around the abdominal cavity, we have the connective tissue covering, that is called the peritoneum, and the cavity inside the peritoneum is the peritoneal cavity. We will talk about those two things. Then we will talk about the first organ or structure of the digestive system. If we start from the top, the first organ is the mouth. We will talk about the mouth, the structure of the mouth, the inside structures of the mouth, the boundaries of the mouth. So we will talk about those things. Then we will talk about the layers of the wall of the gastrointestinal tract. Gastrointestinal tract is a tube starting from the mouth to the anus, all the way. It's a tube, and in some places the tube gets narrower, some places the tube gets wider. Okay, so but it's a continuous tube. And if you cut the wall of the tube, you will see few layers. So we'll talk about the layers of the wall of the gastrointestinal tract. You can pass to that side. Are you done this side?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll talk about the layers of the wall of the gastrointestinal tract. Then, regulation of secretion. You know that secretion occurs in the gastrointestinal tract. The acid secretion and other enzymes or hormones are secreted in the gastrointestinal tract. How the secretion is regulated or controlled, we'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about the nerve plexuses of the gastrointestinal tract. Inside the wall of the gastrointestinal tract, we have nerve plexuses. Plexuses are networks, right? You know that, networks of nerves. So we'll see what are the plexuses present in the nerve plexuses present in the wall of the gastrointestinal tract. Movement of the gastrointestinal tract. You know that after you swallow the food, that food passes through the tube. Why that food doesn't stay there? Why that food goes down? Because of the movement of the wall of the gastrointestinal tract. That moves the food down. So we'll see what are the different types of movements occur in the wall of the gastrointestinal tract. The purpose of movement. One is due to the movement, the food, large food particles break into smaller molecules, right? Because movement breaks the food. That is number one. Number two, movement of the food downwards through the gastrointestinal tract. So we'll see what are different types of movements occur in the gastrointestinal tract. Then we'll talk about other parts of the gastrointestinal tract. Okay. The organs of the digestive system are divided into two groups. What are those two groups? One group is called the alimentary canal or gastrointestinal tract or GI tract, gastrointestinal tract. That is the tube starting from the mouth to the anus. It's a continuous tube, and as I told you, at different locations, the tube gets narrower, and some areas the tube gets expanded or wider. But gastrointestinal tract or alimentary canal is the tube. So what are the parts of the tube? If you start from the mouth, you already know. Mouth, then pharynx, then esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and large intestine. Okay, they are connected to each other. Then outside of gastrointestinal tract, we have other organs. Those are called accessory digestive organs. What are those organs? Those organs are teeth, tongue, gallbladder, salivary glands, liver, pancreas. Those are not actually the part of the tube, long tube. Those are accessory digestive organs, other structures of the digestive system. So if you see this picture, you can see those organs. So you see the mouth and then the pharynx. Then from the pharynx, a long tube, narrow long tube goes down to the stomach. So from the lower end of the pharynx, that narrow long tube takes the food to the stomach. That long tube is the esophagus. And then what happens? That tube gets very wide, expanded, and form the stomach. Okay? So that is the stomach. And then the tube again gets narrow and form small intestine. Okay? So small intestine starting here. Duodenum is the first part, then jejunum and the ileum. So those are the three parts of the small intestine here. And then the large intestine, the tube again gets wider and form the large intestine. And large intestine has different parts. Ascending colon going up, transverse colon, descending colon, then sigmoid colon, cecum, anal canal, and anus. So those are the parts of the large intestine. Okay. So colon, cecum, so first part of the large intestine is called the cecum, then ascending colon. Okay, so this is the cecum, very small part, very first part, cecum, then ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, sigmoid colon, then rectum, anal canal, and anus. So those are the parts of the large intestine. So you see that tube, it's a continuous tube. Gastrointestinal tract is a continuous tube. At different locations, it gets narrower and or wider. Now, other accessory digestive organs are salivary glands. You see here, tongue inside the mouth. Then you see the liver here, gallbladder. Okay, so pancreas. Those are the accessory digestive organs. Teeth, tongue, salivary glands, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, those are accessory organs. Okay. Now the processes of digestion. In our digestive system, 6 essential processes occur. What are those? Ingestion, propulsion, digestion, 2 types of digestion, mechanical digestion and chemical digestion, and absorption and defecation. So those are the 6 processes take place in the digestive system. Ingestion. What is ingestion? Ingestion is just taking the food inside the mouth from outside, right? So if you, when you put the food inside the mouth from outside, that is called the ingestion. Okay, very simple. Then propulsion. Propulsion is moving the food through the digestive system, through the gastrointestinal tract. That is the propulsion, the movement of the food. That occurs in the digestive system, we know that.
Is chewing part of that process?
Chewing is also the process of propulsion, yes. So that is the starting of propulsion, right? Then digestion. What is digestion? Digestion is the breakdown of large food into small molecules. So that breakdown process, very simple. What is digestion? Digestion is the breakdown of the food. Okay. Now, 2 types of digestion occur in the digestive system. One is the mechanical. When you crash the food, when you chew the food, right? You grind the food, cut the food. Those are mechanical. We don't use any chemical. We use the pressure, right? Pressure to break the food. chemical digestion is the breakdown of food by chemicals. You know that in your digestive system, hydrochloric acid, other enzymes are released, right? Secreted. In your mouth, saliva is released, right? Saliva is secreted in the mouth to break the food. So when the breakdown occurs by chemicals, that process is the chemical digestion. When breakdown occurs by mechanical pressure, that is the mechanical. Absorption. After digestion, what happens? The small food molecules are taken into the blood of the body. Okay, so nutrients, right? The small molecules are called now nutrients. The nutrients must be taken into the blood. So the process by which the nutrient molecules are taken into the blood from the gastrointestinal tract, that is called the absorption. So absorption process is the process by which the food molecules are taken into the blood. Nutrients are the food molecules. Okay. Then another process is called defecation. Unnecessary food stuffs. Those stuffs we don't need to take into the blood. Those food stuff must be excreted out from the body. So the process by which the feces gets out from the body, that is called defecation. Okay. So those are the 6 processes of the digestive system. Here in this picture, you can see those processes that are shown nicely. So ingestion is the process of taking food in the mouth. Then what happens? Propulsion. The food starts to move down. That movement of the food is the propulsion. Okay? That starts with swallowing, then different types of movements move the food downwards. Then the digestion. Digestion starts where? If I ask you, then digestion starts where? In the mouth, right? What type of digestion occurs in the mouth? Say loud. Sorry.
Mastication.
Yeah, is that mechanical or chemical? Mechanical. Saliva is released in the mouth? No, that is right. Mechanical is when you crash the food, right? Chew the food, that is mechanical. And also, saliva is released in the mouth, right? Saliva has chemicals. So that is chemical digestion, right? So both mechanical and chemical digestions occur in the mouth. Okay? So inside the mouth, the digestion starts, and both types of digestion occur in the mouth. Absorption mainly occurs in the small intestine. What happens? The nutrients, the small food molecules, are taken into the blood. Proteins and carbohydrates directly enter into the blood capillaries. Large lipids or fat molecules enter in the lymphatic capillaries. So first, the large fat molecules will be taken into lymphatic circulation. And do you remember the in lymphatic circulation, the lymph is finally drained into the large veins, remember? At the junction of internal jugular and subclavian. So although the large lipid molecules are taken into the lymphatic circulation, finally it is given to the blood, in large veins of the blood. So that is absorption, the process by which the nutrients are taken into the blood. Then unnecessary food stuffs will get out from the body as feces. That process is the defecation. Okay. Now we talk about the peritoneum and the peritoneal cavity. Peritoneum is the serous membrane of the abdominal cavity. You know the abdominal cavity, and around the abdominal cavity we have the connective tissue membrane that is called the peritoneum. And peritoneum has 2 layers, like pericardium or pleura. The peritoneum also has 2 layers, parietal peritoneum and visceral peritoneum. Okay? Now, if this is, I'm drawing a cross section, okay? If you cut the abdominal area like this, make a cross section. So this is the wall, right? Abdominal wall. And this is the abdominal cavity, right? Abdominal cavity is here. Now, we know that inside the abdominal cavity, we have the digestive organs. For example, this is your intestine. This is your liver here, okay? Just guess that. These are the digestive organs in your abdominal cavity, okay? Now, the parietal layer of peritoneum is attached to the inner surface of the wall of the abdomen. So this is the parietal layer of peritoneum, okay? Attached to the inner surface of the wall of the abdominal cavity. And then from there, what happens? The peritoneum goes in and covers the digestive organs like this. So this one is not attached to the wall. So this is attached to what? Outer surface of the internal organs, digestive organs. So the one attached to the outer surface of the digestive organs, that one is called the viscera. Make sense? Okay. Now, in between the parietal and visceral, you have lot of spaces. That is the peritoneal cavity. Okay. So the space between the two layers, that is the cavity. Peritoneal cavity. And peritoneal cavity contains peritoneal fluid. And you know the importance of that fluid, same as pericardial fluid or pleural fluid, prevents the friction mainly. Okay. Here you see they have shown the same thing I have shown on the board. So this is the cross section of the abdomen. So you see the wall, this is the abdominal wall. The one is attached to the wall, that is the parietal, and the one covering the digestive organs, that one is the visceral layer of peritoneum. Now, another thing you need to know, that is called mesentery. What is mesentery? Mesentery is the inward folds of peritoneum. From the wall, you see I told you that from the wall, the peritoneum, the parietal peritoneum will go inwards. Then it will cover the internal organ. So when the peritoneum is going towards the organs, that part is called the mesentery. Okay? So the one is covering the organ, that is the visceral peritoneum, but the one is heading to the organ, towards the organ, that is called the mesentery. Okay? So mesentery is a double layer of peritoneum. What are the advantages or functions of mesentery? Mesentery routes for blood vessels, lymphatics, and nerves. So what happens? The blood vessels, lymphatics, and nerves pass through the mesentery. They pass through the mesentery, those structures. Holds organs in place and stores fat. So it's like, mesentery is like that. If I want to tie you, just think that you are standing here and I'm tying you, your hands and legs with rope, by rope to the wall. The rope is the mesentery. Okay? So the mesentery holds the organs in right place. So you know that inside the abdominal cavity you have different organs, right? Your liver, your pancreas, your small intestine, large intestine, right? So those organs must be kept in right locations. If nothing is holding the organs, then they will all go down, and it's because of gravitation, right? All will go down and stuck in the lower part of the abdomen. We don't want that, right? So those organs must be kept in right locations inside the abdominal cavity. That is also done by the mesentery. Okay? A lot of fats are stored on the mesentery. So if you see the mesentery, you will see a lot of fat is attached to the mesentery. So storage of fat is another function. Now, retroperitoneal and intraperitoneal organs. Intraperitoneal is very simple to understand. Inside the peritoneal cavity. So you know that this is the peritoneal cavity, and inside that these organs are intra means inside, intraperitoneal organs. Most of the abdominal organs are intraperitoneal organs. That means they are located inside the peritoneum. Now, few organs we have, those are not inside the peritoneum but outside of the peritoneum. If this is the back of the body, your kidneys are here. So kidneys are outside of the peritoneum, right? Not inside the peritoneal cavity. Make sense? So those are called retroperitoneal organs. Those are not inside the peritoneal cavity but outside of the peritoneum. So if I ask you which one is retroperitoneal organ, kidney. Kidney is the retroperitoneal organ. Okay, so you know about peritoneum now. Now we'll talk about the first organ of the digestive system. The first organ of the digestive system is the mouth. And so we'll talk about the mouth. Mouth is also called oral or buccal cavity. The boundary of the oral cavity. Lips are in the front. So anterior boundary is formed by lips, upper and lower lips. Cheeks form the lateral boundaries of the oral cavity, right? Cheeks are here, so form the lateral boundaries. Palate. If you put your finger inside the oral cavity or mouth and move up, you will touch the palate, right? So palate forms the roof or floor, roof of the oral cavity. And then tongue. Tongue forms the floor of the oral cavity. So that is the boundary. And the opening of the mouth is called the oral orifice, the anterior opening through which we put the food or ingest the food in the mouth. The mouth is lined with stratified squamous epithelium. Make sense? Because I told you before many times, those areas get a lot of frictions, right? Those areas should be lined with stratified squamous. So, a lot of friction occurs inside the mouth. That's why the mouth is lined with stratified squamous type of epithelium. Okay. So here you see inside the mouth from the side. So you can see the anterior boundary formed by the upper and lower lips. Then the roof is formed by the palate, and you know that palate has two parts. Anterior part is the hard palate formed by bones, and posterior part is formed by the soft palate formed by the skeletal muscle. And the floor is the tongue, okay, and sides are formed by the cheek. So that is the boundary of the mouth. Okay, if you see the oral cavity from the front, if you open the mouth big, large, and see through it, it will look like this. So we'll see all the structures right here. You know, upper and lower lips. Now, the area between the lip and the teeth. That area is called vestibule. Okay? So just next to the lip or inside part of the lip is the vestibule.
Those help produce sound, like I guess when you're talking, or just, what are those for?
Saliva.
Okay, good.
Saliva is released there but produced in the salivary glands, right? Okay. Then next is called the gingiva or gums. That is the area between the vestibule and the teeth. So this area is the gum. And then teeth, you know that we have different sets of teeth. And then the frenulum, you need to know frenulum. Frenulum is the tissue that connects. There are two types of frenulum. You see, one is called the labial frenulum and another is called lingual frenulum. Labium indicates what? Lip. And lingual, tongue. So labial frenulum connects the lip to the vestibule, and lingual frenulum connects the tongue to the tissue underneath the tongue. Okay? So this is the lingual frenulum attached to the tongue, and labial frenulum attached to the lip. And there are two labial frenulum, superior labial and inferior labial, because we have upper lip and lower lip. Now, you can see the palate, and this is the palate, and this is the uvula. The end of the soft palate, that is the uvula. You can clearly see that inside if you look through the mouth. Okay? So just remember those few structures. You can see palatine tonsils if you open the mouth and push the tongue down. That's why when you go to the doctor, sometimes if you complain the pain, they will ask you to open the mouth big, and we push the mouth, push the tongue, something, so it will be, you can have a better view. Larger area you can see if you press the tongue down. Okay? And you can see the tonsils, you can see the wall of the pharynx. If there is any infection there, you can see the redness, or you can see the thin layer of pus. Okay, so palate, hard palate is formed by two bones, palatine bone and palatine process of maxilla. So maxilla and palatine bone, those two bones form the hard palate. Which one is in the front? Maxilla, right? Because we know this is maxilla. So maxilla is the front part of hard palate, and palatine bone forms the posterior part of the hard palate. And soft palate is formed by skeletal muscle. Remember that. And the end of the soft palate, that part is called the uvula. Inside the mouth, we have an important organ. Not only important, this is a very interesting organ of our body. It is the tongue. Why it is interesting? Because it performs many functions, and those functions are completely different from each other. That's why it is very interesting. So many different types of functions are performed by the tongue. Tongue helps in digestion. You know that by movement of the tongue, we break the food, right? You can break the food by movement of the tongue. Tongue helps in swallowing of the food. After we mix the food with saliva, then what we do? We push the food backwards, right? By our tongue. So it helps in the swallowing of the food. Mixing the food with saliva is helped by tongue. So digestion, mixing of food with saliva, and swallowing. Those processes are helped by the tongue. Speech, production of modulation of sound to produce speech. That is mainly done by the tongue. Taste of food. You know that in the tongue we have the taste receptors, taste buds, and because of those taste receptors we taste the food. Now you can change the shape of the tongue. Can you? If I ask you to make your tongue long, can you do it? If I ask you to make it shorter, can you do it? You can do it, right? So you can make the tongue longer, you can make the tongue shorter. You can do that. You can move the tongue in different directions. Tongue is the only organ that you can move in all different directions. If I ask you to rotate, retract, protract, you can push it out, you can take it in, right? You can rotate it, you can do all kind of angular movements. That is very interesting that you can move the tongue in many different ways. You can also change the shape of the tongue. So two things here. One is you can move the tongue. Number two, you can change the shape of the tongue, right? If I ask you to make it shorter, you can do it. So the movement of the tongue is helped by the muscles outside of the tongue, but attached to the tongue. So those muscles are attached to the tongue, but coming from outside. Those muscles help in the movement. Those are called extrinsic muscles. And the shape of the tongue is changed by the intrinsic tongue muscles. Those muscles are inside the tongue. So those muscles form the tongue. Inside the tongue, right? So if you just think that this is your tongue, so the muscle fibers inside the tongue, when those muscle fibers will contract, the whole tongue will get shorter, right? If the muscle fibers contract inside the tongue will get shorter. Now movement. Movement should be done by the muscles attached to the tongue from outside. Make sense? Like if the muscle is attached from here, when this muscle will contract, tongue will go that way, right? If the muscle is attached to the bottom, it will move the tongue down. Attached above, it will move. So extrinsic muscles help in the movement. Intrinsic muscles help in changing the shape of the tongue. Make sense? Okay. How we taste the food by the tongue, because tongue has the taste receptors. Taste receptors are located inside the papilla. So if you see the tongue from outside, you see tiny dot-like structures throughout the tongue, right? Small, tiny, round structures. So those are papilla. Inside the papilla, we have taste buds. Inside the taste buds, we have taste receptors. So if I write like this, from the largest to the smallest, tongue is the largest one. Then throughout the tongue, surface of the tongue, we have the papilla. Papilla are those small structures in the tongue. Then if you open the papilla, inside the papilla you will see taste buds. So taste buds are located inside the papilla. Now if you open the taste buds, inside the taste buds you have taste receptors. Okay, taste receptors. So this is how the receptors are located in your tongue. Okay? Do you have any question? Okay. So the largest is the tongue. Then next is the. If you have any difficulty, ask me. Do you have any question? Okay. So tongue is the largest one. Then the papilla. Inside the papilla you have what? Taste buds. Then inside the taste bud you have taste receptors. Okay. So that's how the taste receptors are housed in your tongue. Okay. There are 4 different types of papilla are present in our tongue: filiform, fungiform, circumvallate, and foliate. Those are 4 different types of papilla. I may ask you the test that are different types of papilla present in the tongue. Now we'll see how they look like and where they are located. So fungiform papilla are like very tiny dots and present throughout the tongue. Okay. So these are the fungiform. And circumvallate papilla are larger than fungiform and present only few in number, usually 10 to 16 in number, and larger in size, and located where? In the posterior part of the tongue, and they line up in a way that look like inverted V or U. So inverted V or U shape arrangement formed by the circumvallate papilla in the back of the tongue. So these are the circumvallate papilla. Foliate papilla are like small, tiny folds present in the back of the tongue, where in both sides of the back of the tongue. So in both sides of the back of the tongue, you have the foliate papilla, and they look like folds going inwards. So those are the different types of papilla. Salivary glands. Salivary glands are located around the oral cavity and produce saliva. You know that saliva is a highly watery secretion. Highly what? Watery secretion. And 3 sets of salivary glands we have around the oral cavity. What are those? Parotid, submandibular, and sublingual. Okay, so those are 3 types of or 3 sets of salivary glands. And saliva is highly watery secretion, but it contains some enzymes. So we'll see the important functions of saliva. Cleanses the mouth. Continuously, saliva is released in the mouth to clean the mouth. Moistures and dissolves food chemicals. Very important. If food is very dry, you won't taste the food. If no saliva is secreted in your mouth, you won't taste the food at all. So, to taste the food must get mixed with saliva. Okay? And get dissolved in saliva. Aids in bolus formation. So saliva is highly watery, but it is slightly sticky too. Right? It is slightly sticky. So that stickiness of the saliva help in the formation of bolus, food bolus. All food molecules will get attached to each other, and a nice bolus of food will be formed. That is very helpful to push the food backwards, right? So the food bolus formation is helped by saliva because of its stickiness. Okay? Contains enzymes that helps in the breakdown of foods. Saliva contains 2 types of digestive enzymes. One is amylase, that is called salivary amylase, lipase. Okay, so those two enzymes are present in the saliva. Amylase helps in what? Digestion of starch, carbohydrates. Very good. And lipase helps in the digestion of fat, lipids. Lipase, lipids, right? So lipase helps in the digestion of lipids. So if now I ask you that which foods are chemically digested inside your mouth? Carbohydrates and fats or lipids, right? But no protein. Protein is digested mechanically, of course. Everything is digested mechanically in the mouth, right? But chemical digestion occurs in the mouth are carbohydrate, starch, and the lipids. Make sense? No protein digestion occurs in the chemically. No protein digestion occurs in the mouth. Sugar? Sugar is carbohydrate, right? Okay. Where those three sets of salivary glands are located? Parotid glands are the largest salivary glands. Among those three sets, the parotid glands are the largest. They are located anterior to the ear, in front of your ear, here. Okay? In front of the lower part of the ear, you have the parotid glands. Submandibular, by its name, you can tell, right, where the submandibular glands are located. Medial to the body of the mandible. You know this is the mandible, and the submandibular glands are located here. Okay? Medial to the body of the mandible. Sublingual are located under the tongue. Lingual is the tongue, and sub is the under. So under the tongue. Here you see the location of those three sets of glands, and parotid is the largest, remember, and it's the submandibular. They have removed the mandible. You see, this is the body of the mandible should be here, and in the inner side of the body of the mandible, you have the submandibular, and this is the tongue, this is the sublingual. Okay, and see, these are the green tube-like structures. These are the ducts. You know that exocrine glands have ducts, right? And endocrine glands are ductless glands, right? So these are what? Endocrine or exocrine? Exocrine, because exocrine glands have ducts. So those are the ducts, tube-like structures that take the enzymes and release the enzyme inside the oral cavity or mouth. Okay? So saliva is taken by the duct and released into the mouth, inside the mouth. Composition of saliva. Saliva has two types of secretions, serous and mucus. I have talked about this before in the respiratory system. Serous secretion is more watery. Watery secretion is the serous, and mucus is sticky. And because of mucus, I told you that saliva is slightly sticky, right? Mostly watery, but slightly sticky because of mucus. That helps in putting the food molecules together and form the bolus. Okay, 97 to 99.5% of saliva is water. Sometimes saliva is a little bit thick, sometimes too watery. That's why the range is there, 97 to 99.5% water. Slightly acidic solution. Saliva is slightly acidic. I don't know if you have seen, sometimes when I was very small, if I used to get a small cut, first thing, playing outside, got a cut, put the saliva. Why? That makes sense, because saliva has, it is slightly acidic, that can inactivate or kill the microorganisms. Also, the saliva has small amount of antibodies that can also help in killing the microorganisms. Okay? sodium potassium chloride phosphorus bicarbonate, salivary amylase and lipase. We have talked about that. Amylase helps in the digestion of carbohydrate and lipase helps in the digestion of lipids. Mucin is the chemical of mucus that helps in the formation of bolus. Metabolic wastes are excreted out from the body in very small amount. Mainly the metabolic wastes get out from the body as urine, but a small amount of urea, uric acid get out from the body to the saliva. Okay? Lysozyme, immunoglobulin A. I told you the antibodies, right? The small amount of antibodies are present in the saliva. Immunoglobulin is the antibody, you know that. Defenses, another type of chemicals, help in the destruction of the microorganisms. Okay, so those are the chemicals present in the saliva. Lysozyme, immunoglobulin A, defensin, they help in the destruction of microorganisms. Okay, now inside the mouth we have teeth. The number of teeth is different in early life and late life. At age of 6 to 24 months, we get 20 deciduous teeth. So those 20 teeth we get in very early part of our life. Those are called deciduous teeth. And then the deciduous teeth is removed, and new teeth we get. Those are 32 in number. Those are called permanent teeth. Okay. How we classify those 32 permanent teeth in our mouth? Incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. So those are 4 sets or 4 groups of teeth: incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. Incisors help in chopping or cutting the food. Okay, so incisors must be like what? Like blade. Right? We cut like knife. We cut the food. You know that we have 2 dental arches, upper arch and lower arch, right? So we have total 8 incisors. So in one arch, how many we have? 4. In upper arch we have 4, and lower arch we have 4. Okay? Canines, we have total 4. So in each arch we have 2 canines. And canines, if you see the upper end of canines, the upper ends are pointed, sharp and pointed. So canines help in tearing the fleshy structures, fleshy foods, okay, like muscles, meat. Those things are teared by canines. And that's why you see canines are very large, long, and sharp in some animals. Those animals eat flesh or meat, right? They need the canines more powerful. That's why long and more pointed, like tigers. You see, the canines are very long. Premolars, we have 8. So in one arch we have 4, and molars we have total 12. So in each arch we have 6. Now, if I ask you the arch, how many arches we have? 2. One arch is attached to the maxilla, another is attached to the mandible, right? Now, in each arch we have how many halves? 2 halves, right? Right and left. And same teeth we have in right and left side. Same. So just remember that. So I may ask you how many incisors we have. If I ask you how many incisors we have in one arch, that is 4, right? And total we have 8. So here you see in each arch we have 10 deciduous teeth. We should have 10 because total we have 20, right? The small kids, not the small kids. Now these are the permanent teeth, and this is one arch. So how many should have in one arch? How many total we have? 32. In one arch we should have how many? 16. Okay. So this is one arch, right? Now these are the incisors. We have total 8 incisors. So in each arch we have 4, right? So 4 incisors. And then we have in each arch we have 2 canines. So these are the canines, and then the premolars and molars. Okay. So 6 molars and 4 premolars. Parts of a tooth. If you see the tooth from outside, not the structure, if you just take a tooth out from your mouth and just take the tooth, painful, right? Take a tooth out and see the tooth. It has crown, neck, and root. Those 3 parts you will see in a tooth. Now, if you cut the tooth and see the structure of the tooth that is inside, then what are the structures you will be able to see? You will see the cementum, periodontal ligament, dentin, pulp cavity, pulp, and root canal. So those are the structures you'll see inside the tooth. So here, first we'll see the parts from outside. This is the crown part. That part you can see from outside in your mouth. Okay? Only the part, upper part you can see because the lower part is inserted in the gum. So the part, exposed part is the crown. Then inside the gum or gingiva, that part is the neck part. Okay? So this is your gum, so this is the neck. And the part inside the bony socket, mandible or maxilla, you have the sockets. So the part inside the bone, that part is called the root. Okay? So you see 3 parts, the crown, neck, and the root part. Crown is the part you can see, and neck is inside the gum, and the root is inside the bone. Now, if you see the structure of a tooth, enamel is the outermost covering. That white outermost covering is the enamel, and then under the enamel you have dentin. Dentin is under the enamel, very hard structure, dentin. Then pulp cavity. Inside the tooth, you will see a cavity that is called the pulp cavity, and inside the cavity you have soft tissue, and that tissue let the blood vessels and nerve pass through it. Okay, so that soft tissue is called the pulp. So pulp is the soft tissue, and that contains the blood vessels, arteries, veins, and nerves. Okay, and then the lower part you have the root canal. It's a long, narrow canal going down all the way. That is the root canal. So the blood vessels and nerves actually go inside the pulp cavity through the root canal. Okay? And a ligament that attaches the root of the tooth to the bone, that ligament is called periodontal ligament. I may ask this. what's the name of that ligament that connects the root of the tooth to the bone. That ligament is the periodontal ligament. Okay. Okay. So you now know about teeth. Now we'll talk about the regulation of gastrointestinal tract. So regulation of what? To know that, you need to know what happens in the gastrointestinal tract. Then you need to know the regulation, right? Regulation of that function. So what happens in gastrointestinal tract? Contraction occurs in the gastrointestinal tract. Movement occurs in the wall of the gastrointestinal tract. Why? To move the food down. I told you at the very beginning that propulsion is the movement of the food downwards, right? So to move the food, we need the contraction of the wall of the gastrointestinal tract, right? So contraction is one thing that happens in the gastrointestinal tract to move the food down. Another is secretion at different locations, secretion of enzymes or acids occur, right, in the gastrointestinal tract. So regulation or control indicates the regulation of contraction and regulation of secretion, or we can say regulation of movement and regulation of secretion. So those two things are regulated. Okay. Two types of receptors are present in the gastrointestinal tract: Mechanoreceptors and Chemoreceptors. Now, what are the, if I ask you, what is the function of mechanoreceptor? You already know. If you eat too much, then what will happen? Just think about the stomach, one structure. If you eat too much, your stomach will get bigger. And in the wall of the stomach, you have mechanoreceptors that will detect the tension in the wall of the stomach, the pressure in the wall of the stomach. So mechanoreceptors will detect the pressure on the wall of the stomach. Make sense? So they will be activated by pressure. And chemoreceptors, the food you eat, do you eat same type of food every time? Same type of food every time or not? No. We eat so many different types of food, right? Some are more acidic, some are more alkaline. So the chemicals of foods are the chemicals. So the chemicals can also stimulate the receptors. We have the chemoreceptors in the gastrointestinal tract. Okay? So chemoreceptors will be stimulated by the food molecules or chemicals, and mechanoreceptors will be stimulated by the amount of food, how much food you have taken. Okay? If you take too much food, then the wall will be stressed more and mechanoreceptors will be activated. Why those receptors are important? Because if your stomach has too much food, then movement should be more to break the food, right? If your stomach has, just think that you have eaten a lot of fat-rich food, then your stomach should decide that, right? What kind of food is there? Is it fat or carbohydrates or proteins? And based on that, your stomach will secrete the enzymes, right? If fat is more, then lipase should be released more, right? If carbohydrate is more, amylase should be released more. That's why you need the chemoreceptors to detect what kind of food is that, right? So those are the receptors. Now, two types of controls occur. Controls of movement and secretion. One is called the short reflex and another is long reflex. Short reflex is done by intrinsic nerves and long reflex is done by extrinsic nerves. What is that? So if this is the, just think this is a cross section of your stomach. So this is the wall of the stomach. Wall of stomach. Okay. In the wall of the stomach, you have nerve plexuses. So these are the nerves inside the wall of the stomach. Nerves. And also, outside of the stomach, you have the, just think this is your spinal cord. Spinal cord, okay? So, from the spinal cord, nerve is also going to the stomach. Okay? So, you see here, two types of nerves are in the stomach. One type of nerves are present in the wall and not going outside, it's inside the wall of the stomach. These are called intrinsic. Intrinsic nerve plexus. Another type of nerve fibers are present in the wall of the stomach, but they are connected to the outside, to the spinal cord. So these are the extrinsic. Both are controlling the movement and secretion. Okay, so it's extrinsic. Okay, so that is the difference, intrinsic and extrinsic. So now I said that intrinsic controls short reflex and extrinsic controls long reflex. We'll see what is the difference between those two. Intrinsic is related to short. And extrinsic is related to what? Long reflex. Very good. Okay. We have how many different types of receptors? Two. Chemoreceptors and mechanical receptors. Very good. So I am repeating the same thing. We have two types of receptors, you know that. Chemo and mechanical. Now, when you take the food goes inside the stomach. Now, that food can, if these are the chemoreceptors, the food molecules will stimulate the chemoreceptors, and then the receptors will send signal to the nerves. The receptors can send signal to the local nerves, intrinsic, or the signal can enter into the extrinsic nerves. If the signal is given to the local nerves here, and then nerves will do what? Nerves will do two things. One is the movement, another is the secretion. Okay? Just remember the nerves will do those two things, those two controls, secretion and movement or contraction. Now, if the food molecules stimulate the chemoreceptors and chemoreceptors activate the intrinsic nerve plexuses, and then nerve plexuses will tell the glands to secrete the enzymes and will tell the smooth muscle fibers to cause what? Contraction. Muscle fibers will cause what? Muscles will cause contraction of movement, right? And who will cause the secretion? Glands. Glands, right? Glands will cause the secretion. So the nerve plexus will tell the muscle, we have the muscle, the smooth muscle in the wall of the stomach, esophagus, small intestine, large intestine. So the nerve plexus will tell the muscle to do what? Contraction, right? Muscles will do the contraction. And will tell the glands to do what? Secretion. Okay? So if everything occurs inside the wall of the stomach or wall of the gastrointestinal tract by local intrinsic nerve plexuses, that is the short reflex. Now, the receptors can also send signal to the spinal cord, can go all the way to the brain, central nervous system, and then the spinal cord will send signal back to the wall of the gastrointestinal tract to do the same two things, contraction and secretion, right? But in this case, one case, everything is occurring inside the wall, right? Signal is not going outside. In another case, the signal is going to the outside, spinal cord or to the brain, and coming back, right? To cause the contraction and secretion. So that's why this is called extrinsic and long. Extrinsic is long, right? Going out and coming back. So the signal is traveling long way, right? That is the long reflex. Does it make sense? Short one is occurring inside the wall. The circuit is short, right? Long one is going to the spinal cord or to the brain, then coming back. So that's the extrinsic and long. Okay. But remember, both types of nerve plexuses are doing the same actions, contraction and secretion. Okay?
So when that says enteric, is it intrinsic?
Which one?
The
Sharp.
first thing there that said enteric causes long reflexes, does that mean intrinsic? On the last one.
Here, you see, this is the wall, right? Now you will understand this clearly. This is the wall, okay? So the chemoreceptors or mechanoreceptors will be activated by internal stimuli. Stimuli means what? The food, right? Chemical stimuli. The volume of the food, right? That's the mechanical. Volume of the food is mechanical. They will stimulate the receptors, and this is the intrinsic. Intrinsic means inside the wall. Everything, just forget this part. Everything is occurring in this part, okay? That's the intrinsic. Some cases, what can happen, if more forceful contraction is needed, then signal should come from the brain, right, from the spinal cord. If more forceful contraction is needed. In that case, the signal will get out to the central nervous system, will come back, and will cause the contraction or secretion. Now, this one should work through the intrinsic finally, because intrinsic is inside the wall, right? So that, but just know that what I have told you, that the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic, short and long, and what type of controls are done. Control of secretion, control of contraction or movement. Another type of control occurs, that is very interesting. Like when you see the food, if you are very hungry, when you see the food, although no food is inside your gastrointestinal tract, no food is inside your mouth or in your stomach, secretion occurs, contraction occurs, right? If you see the food and if you are hungry, or if you smell the food, secretion will occur in your mouth, in your stomach. Also, you will feel small movement occurs in the stomach. So, in that case, the signal is not activating the receptors in the wall, right? Your vision or smell or olfaction, those signals are going to the brain from outside and activating the brain, and brain is sending signal through the long pathway to the wall and causing that. That is called cephaly. Just write it down. Not intrinsic, not extrinsic, it's not going from the wall of the stomach, getting in from outside. Smell or vision, viewing the food, can also cause the secretion or movement of the gastrointestinal tract.
Does that do for memory receptors in your brain?
Yeah, the olfactory receptors in your nose, or visual receptors in your eye. Right? Okay, so let's stop here. You have any question? No? Okay, so your lecture exam will include the respiratory fold and part of the digestive system where we have stopped.
Did your daughter, did you help?
She likes Perlu. Perlu, she likes the campus is nice. Although it's nowhere. Like there's no big city around. Yeah. But inside the campus is nice. Also less distractions. We also went to Loyola, Chicago, and Northwestern. She likes Northwestern too, but it's very complicated. Hard to get in. Do you go there?
Maybe less than hour. I decided to redo my
Drove through the car.
I haven't heard anything. And it was cost 2 cents installation.
was going around.
Yes.
That's not good.
You were both sick.
Only up to that. Yes, I
He needs to sleep and he doesn't.
Do you have any question?
Did you say she would do it?
She liked that campus. And we also went to Loyola and Chicago and Northwestern. So let's see, she liked Northwestern too. But she said less competition for
What she wanted to study?
She wants to study pre-med.
Okay. I did biology at Purdue.
You did?
Oh, yeah. 17 years ago. Yeah.
How long you were there? For how long? Couple of years?
I did my undergraduate there.
Oh, okay.
So I was there for 3 years. I started
years.
out at the American University.